Do you want to find out if you or your family member is autistic? Maybe deep down this autism thing resonates, but you don't fit the stereotypes. Maybe you are an older person looking for answers about why your life did not quite go as planned. Or you're just a bit different from everyone around you. Well, you've come to the right place. Let's chat. Hi, I'm Phil, a very late diagnosed autistic adult, and it's my goal to help spread positive information about autism, bust unhelpful myths, and advocate for older autistic and neurodivergent people just like me. In this podcast, I want to deep dive into exactly what autism is to help you get a closer and more positive understanding of who you are, autistic or not. So let's dive on in. First up, let's have a close look at what autism actually is. There are so many stereotypes out there in the media, TV and movies, not to mention that everyone seems to have a concept of what they believe autism is, that the real meaning and understanding of autism just gets buried under the noise. By this I mean everyone seems to have a relative or neighbour with an autistic child who maybe is bang on the stereotype of the small boy who rocks, lines up their toys, maybe does not speak very much, or even hits their head when overwhelmed. Okay, so let's be clear, those things are absolutely actions that may fit the experience of some autistic people, so let's not diminish anyone who might have those experiences. But autism is so much more than that very narrow stereotyped picture. So what is autism? The word autism is derived from the Greek autos, meaning self, and was coined by the Swiss psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler in 1911, who used it to describe the withdrawal into one's inner world which he had observed in some individuals with schizophrenia. But it was not used to describe the condition as it is known today until Leo Kanner made the distinction between autism and schizophrenia in 1943. So autism in fact literally means selfism. This does not mean autistic people are selfish, but more that we focus on our own world. Autism is a lifelong difference in the brain. It affects how a person experiences, interacts with, and perceives the world. This difference occurs in the earliest developmental stages of life and affects how the autistic person communicates and interacts with other people. This can manifest in the autistic person communicating in different ways to neurotypical people, which in medical language is framed as a deficit, as the assumption is that the brain is somehow bad or wrong. We will come back to this in a future podcast in the interest of keeping this concise, but this assumption is absurd and damaging. Okay, enough said. So what can this difference look like? Autistic people may prefer to engage primarily in topics of conversation that are of interest to us and may lose interest when the conversation moves away from those topics. Some autistic people may struggle to make small talk, as the pointlessness of talking about the weather or sport or the traffic may be difficult for the autistic brain. But having said that, some autistic people are excellent at small talk and may indeed have a keen interest in the weather or sport, so stereotypes can fall down quickly. Autistic people may struggle to be in a room with lots of other people, and this can be for several reasons. The autistic brain processes the world around us in extraordinary detail, which can make crowded spaces overwhelming, as all that sensory input makes the autistic brain work in overdrive. This can be due to noise and visual overstimulation, or in fact overstimulation in any of the senses. Meeting new people can also be challenging for the autistic person, as navigating things like small talk can be more intense in an overstimulating environment. This may mean the autistic person stays on the outside, observing rather than diving into social interactions. But when overwhelmed, the autistic person may escape outside or even leave without a word to anyone. In one-on-one conversation, an autistic person may appear distracted or not make consistent eye contact. In fact, eye contact may be distracting for the autistic person, so lack of eye contact may be more of a sign that we are trying to listen intently. Conversely, an autistic person may try to make eye contact to fit in, And this forced eye contact may come across as too intense or odd. Often I find that I am constantly curating my eye contact, alternating between making sure I am giving enough to consciously looking away for fear of giving too much. This dance is a constant battle and very distracting. The typical back and forth in conversation may sometimes be a bit disjointed with an autistic person, and this can be for several reasons. Autistic people typically may not interpret body language or facial expressions the same way as neurotypical people. We may miss subtle cues or take the wrong meaning entirely. Autistic people may also take longer to process what's being said by the other person. And autistic people may jump to literal interpretations, so may miss hidden meaning or subtext. And because of all this, we learn to hide these differences so we don't stand out. This is called masking and is very common in undiagnosed autistic adults. Autistic people find comfort in repetition of behaviours, sounds, language, and any other sensory stimulus. This repetition can be in the form of repetitive body movements like leg bouncing, hand flapping, pacing, rocking, swaying, or spinning, but may also include spinning objects to watch that repetitive motion. We might even repeat words or phrases or even quotes from TV shows or movies, or repeat sounds we hear around us. All these actions are called stims, which is short for self-stimulatory behaviours. There are many more examples of stims, so I'll come back to that in a future podcast and break it down in more detail. This repetition may also be in how we go about our day. By that I mean we might like things to be done in certain predictable or planned ways. These are referred to as routines, and this is common for autistic people. Interrupting the routines of an autistic person can cause us to stress at a level that might seem out of context to the situation. The autistic brain has the ability to focus intently on specific subjects of interest with an intensity that many others can only dream of. This focus is often referred to as hyperfocus and often revolves around special interests where the autistic person might focus on and maybe know everything there is to know about a certain subject. This could be anything, but common ones might be trains, space, Lego, or Barbies. But in reality, this could be anything, maybe Roman history, or penguins, or cats, or Polynesian navigation folklore. For me, audio and acoustics has always been at the front of my special interests, which led me not only to work in music production, but also get a physics degree specialising in acoustics and audio. But I also have special interests in space and astronomy, golf and sailing. Autism is often referred to as a spectrum, as the experience of every autistic person is different, with different strengths, challenges, interests and behaviours. And all these factors can change over the lifespan of the autistic individual. All autistic people require support, but the level of support required will be different for each individual and will change constantly as life's demands change. Autism is a disability, but can also manifest with many strengths and abilities as well. With the right support, autistic people live fulfilled lives and contribute to society in unique and valuable ways. Autism is highly heritable. That means very often an autistic child has an autistic parent or grandparent. Often when a child gets a diagnosis, a parent becomes aware that the child is just like themselves. This can also lead to that parent being diagnosed. One of the key aspects of autism that can be overlooked is that autistic people will very likely experience their senses in extreme ways. This might be as an oversensitivity, but can also be undersensitivity. Examples here might include sensitivity to noise in the world around us. This is why autistic people often wear noise-cancelling headphones in public. Bright lights or sunlight might also be so overwhelming as to cause pain, so we might need to always wear sunglasses, and maybe even indoors when the lighting is uncomfortable. Clothing may feel itchy, restrictive, or extremely uncomfortable to us. Do you cut off tags, for instance? Smells or tastes can be overpowering constantly. Have you always been a very fussy eater? There is so much more on the issue of sensitivity, so to explore that further, please refer to my video on sensory autism. Another common experience of autistic people is that when we are consistently overwhelmed, whether that be because of sensory overstimulation, disruption to our routines, or emotional overstimulation, we might experience a meltdown, which might appear as an unexpected outburst. But this may also manifest as a shutdown, which can appear quite the opposite. This is more like going quiet or even disassociating from the situation. Both of these responses are the autistic brain's way of dealing with the situation. For more details on meltdowns and shutdowns, please refer to my videos on those subjects also. And one common but also often looked experience of autistic people is how we process information. We tend to pick up more detail from the world around us, whether that be from our senses, as we have discussed, or from the interactions with other people. This can mean that autistic people may appear a bit slow to respond sometimes. This is not because the autistic person is a bit slow or thick, but rather it is because we have to process so much more information constantly than other people around us that it may take us a moment longer to order that information and work out which bits are relevant and then formulate a response. And it's exhausting to constantly have to process so much all of the time. As a side effect of processing this wider bandwidth of incoming information, the autistic person often sees patterns in the world around us that the majority of other people miss. So, this pattern recognition ability is another common autistic trait. Another key aspect of autism is differences in executive functioning. Executive functioning is our ability to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, make decisions, and juggle multiple tasks simultaneously. It also controls how we monitor our own performance and controls our ability to regulate thoughts and behaviours. In autism, differences in executive functioning might mean we struggle with time management, or the ability to organise our space, tasks, or schedules. Maybe we lose important belongings. We might exhibit rigid patterns of thinking, making it hard to adapt to change, or get upset when plans change. Maybe we find it hard to start a new task, and finishing a task might also be overwhelming. We might get easily distracted or have trouble maintaining focus, and how our memories work might be different. You may easily forget what you were just doing, but remember something from decades ago in extraordinary detail. Or maybe there are times of your life that you just can't remember at all. Now, many of these executive functioning differences are also co-occurring in ADHD. So it's no coincidence that ADHD is also a very common co-occurring diagnosis in people with autism. In fact, up to 70% of autistic people also experience ADHD. And all these factors lead to a higher incidence of anxiety, stress, frustration, overwhelm, and ultimately a constant sense of fatigue in autistic people, with anxiety disorders also being a very common co-diagnosis for many autistic people. And this increased anxiety can also contribute to another common autistic experience, which is sleep disturbances. Maybe you find it difficult to switch off your brain and get to sleep, or you might wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep. Or maybe you experience a physical restlessness in bed. This might be diagnosed as restless leg syndrome and is common in both autism and ADHD. And while mentioning co-occurring conditions, some others that may occur with autism are dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, bipolar disorder, demand avoidance, PDA, borderline personality disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, highly sensitive person syndrome, HSP, mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, and multiple thyroid conditions. Some spinal conditions like scoliosis are very common with autistic people. And the list goes on. Sometimes an autism diagnosis comes years after many of these conditions have been identified. The other common experience of autistic people is when seeking medical intervention on these and many more medical conditions, the treatments may not work as expected by the treating physician. This can be due to the fact that autism creates a whole system of difference within the body, so treating each condition in isolation may, in some instances, not lead to positive outcomes. So it may be that a whole system approach is needed. This is referred to as all the things and is the brainchild of autistic US doctor Mal Hauser. I hope to return to all the things in a future podcast. A key point to finish on here is that autism deeply affects every part of our lives, from play to school to work. Friendships, family, romantic relationships, to health and ageing. And further knock-on effects can dictate socio-economic outcomes through difficulties in finding and maintaining employment, costs of family or relationship breakdown, and often the costs of ongoing complex medical or related mental health conditions. Autism is truly a whole-of-life difference. And while many of these differences may manifest as challenges, it would be wrong to judge autism as being inherently bad, evil, invalid, or less than in any way. Autism at its core is a difference, and as we have already said, that is not only okay, it is in itself valid and even wonderful. Despite my autistic challenges, and to be clear there are many, I would not change my autism, as it is the very core of who I am and what makes me me. Alright, so we've had a very brief look at what autism is in this podcast. There is so much more detail that we could go into, but instead of doing that here and getting bogged down, I want to leave this as more of an overview. To go into more detail on each of these aspects, I've been working on producing podcasts focusing on the individual traits and other topics of interest to autistic people. So I urge you to explore those topics in more detail there. All the videos are located in my autism playlist, which I will leave linked in the description and at the end of this video. And maybe the most important point to end on is that every autistic person is different. This means we will all have a different mix of traits, strengths, challenges, and experiences from each other. So if you don't resonate with everything I speak about, that does not mean you're not autistic, just that your experience is different. So if you think you might be autistic, then keep exploring and understanding yourself. You're worth the effort in doing so. And be aware, you will encounter deniers on the journey, but don't let them turn you from your path. They only know the stereotypes, and autism is anything but a stereotype. And further to this point, you don't need a formal diagnosis to be autistic. Self-identification is valid. If you are autistic, you are autistic, regardless of whether that has been rubber stamped. Sometimes it's only the deniers that require the official diagnosis. So really, do what is right for you. Don't let deniers force you into getting a diagnosis if you're confident in your own self-assessment and satisfied with that. So that's it for now. In the next podcast, we'll have a closer look at the stereotypes and myths around autism and work through those together. So until then, go well. See you next time. Bye for now.